Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me today, fellow colleague, co-host, and national scout at Cover One, Christian Page. How we doing, brother?
Doing well. A little under the weather, but that can't stop me from talking about football.
That's right. Well, and I mean, come on. We got, a few days after Thanksgiving. The food was good. I'm hoping the drinks were better, right? Like, it was a good time. Was Thanksgiving good?
Absolutely. How about you?
Yeah, same. Had too many drinks and way too much food, but favorite holiday, so it works out. But, I mean, we got to jump into it. My boy, Ryan Finley, has accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl. And I think everybody is going to be following me around to see how much I follow him around.
That's what I'll be doing for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it, man. I'm not saying like I'm more excited about Ryan Finley than any quarterback I've ever watched. Like last year, I was so excited to watch Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen and those guys. And like we were mentioning kind of before the show, 2 years ago, the quarterback that we first ever talked about, me and you, was on the Draftster pod, and we were talking about Deshaun Watson and how we thought he was the most pro-ready guy, despite all the disagreements of him throwing only 49 miles per hour and everything else. And there was things that people didn't like, but I mean, you look at what he's doing. He's putting himself in the conversation with a Carson Wentz, a Jared Goff, and one of those guys is one of the top quarterbacks in the first round of the respective drafts. And you look what he's doing right now with the Houston Texans. 8 straight wins. They started 0-3. 8 straight wins. He's a big part of it, of what they're doing offensively. And I'm not trying to, turn everything and say, oh, Ryan Finley's going to do that when he gets to the pros. But 2 years ago, it was Deshaun Watson at this point in time, right around this time. And just going into the year, I had Ryan Finley as QB1. I'm still standing probably alone on that hill. And then, but last year it was Josh Rosen. I thought he was the most pro-ready guy. I'm not saying I'm like some quarterback whisperer, but I think we've both been in agreement over the last 2 years of who we think the top quarterback is in the draft and who we think is the most pro-ready guy. And I think it's no different here with Ryan Finley. And if somebody says he's not the most pro-ready guy, well, then show me the guy that is, because there isn't one. Justin Herbert, lower body mechanics are a wreck. The buzz on him has really fallen off. I mean, he looked great a couple games this year, but nobody's talking about him now. And it's like, well, a few weeks ago, everybody was, oh, I love this guy. I remember when I first watched this guy, this and that. Buzz has fallen off on him, but I'm sticking to my guns here, and I'm standing here still preaching about Ryan Finley, who has probably accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl. So, I mean, we know the Senior Bowl is so important for everybody. How important is it for Ryan Finley? And really, what are some of your thoughts on him? Obviously, I'll get into my thoughts momentarily.
Yeah, I mean, for him alone, getting the notoriety of being at the Senior Bowl, and I think accepting that too, because, of course, he's taken a lot of heat, I guess, for some inconsistencies in his game. But I think this will be a huge step forward for him, bouncing between Boise State, graduating, and then going to North Carolina State. Sure, he may be too seasoned in college. I know that sounds really strange, but, there's always that age thing, or are you too old to develop? And I know that question will be thrown out a little bit, but just going basis on the Senior Bowl, you saw how well I think Baker Mayfield did last year, more in a pro system. And I know that term's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be anymore, but it's very well overused, because if you're looking at the most successful NFL teams right now, the Chiefs, the Rams, the Saints, they all use some kind of spread concept. So I don't want to hear this pro style. He plays in this spread system, this, that, and the other, because every year some quarterback and some NFL team outproves that statement. But going back to Finley, yeah, there's some inconsistencies. I think he has the arm strength. It's just, does he have consistent arm strength? There's some times where he may not consistently follow through on his passes. His lower body mechanics may not always line up with where he wants the football to go. And I think that's some things, but I think from, above the shoulders, what does he give you? I think he's a smart quarterback. He's generally a good decision maker. I think he gives NC State a chance to win every single game. Some of the physical tools, just some inconsistencies there. But I think he can definitely be molded into somebody that could eventually start for your NFL team. But I think the Senior Bowl, I think there'll be a lot of buzz surrounding him. Right now, I guess he's the best quarterback there, and I don't feel bad saying that with Thorson and McSorley, and I guess Gardner Minshew is going to be there now. So I think Finley's by far the best quarterback there right now. We'll wait to see what the other names are thrown into there.
Yeah, and you know where I stand on it. I mean, I'm 100% behind this guy. I'm not saying he is the next Aaron Rodgers or anything like that. I don't know if we get that in this class. I mean, I think if you look at, potential franchise quarterback label, probably giving that to Justin Herbert, maybe Daniel Jones. And sure, maybe you could talk about, a Clayton Thorson or a Gardner Minshew, but realistically, the guy that's going to get you to win now is Ryan Finley. And when you look at the New York Giants, you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, both teams have pieces to the puzzle defensively, especially the Jaguars. And I know, we're now looking at the NFL and really football as a whole that, the defensive game has died. Well, that might be true right now in the regular season, but I mean, let's not forget we did have a playoff game between, the Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars where it was 10-7 or whatever that score was, 13-7. And, of course, the quarterbacks were Tyrod Taylor and Blake Bortles. But, you talk about two teams that have pieces to the puzzle with their defense, potentially the Cincinnati Bengals, maybe the Washington Redskins. They have pieces where they could win now. I mean, Washington, we don't know if Alex Smith is going to play again. Andy Dalton could very well be traded after this year. He just got put on IR. So there's some needs for teams that are looking for a guy that's going to step in and potentially win now. And I think Ryan Finley helps you with that. And if you put him on one of those offenses, I think he's a good fit because you're putting him around with good weapons. And I know he's got a Jacoby Myers. He's got a Calvin Harmon. But let's not forget he is putting the ball in spots. Maybe not as consistent as we would like, but he is putting the ball in spots for only those guys to catch the ball. And that's important. And I think that gets overlooked more than anything else because they see a couple of these bad throws and they go, well, this guy's not any good. He's not it. I cannot stand when I constantly see people say, he ain't it. I mean, did you really watch the entire game? I mean, I watched his game against Clemson, and he did have one interception where he was at fault, and you can see the play in my recent article that I put out today, actually, on Cover One. It's a 2,200-word scouting report on Ryan Finley and really what he is. It shows a ton of plays from the very beginning of when I first started watching him in 2017, in July of 2017, to just recently over the last couple of days, just making sure I'm not missing anything. And there's a throw where he second guesses himself. And he's just one of those guys that I think he does have a tendency to second guess himself. And he's not trusting his arm strength and things like that. He had a wide open guy in a fade route at the top of the screen. Instead, he pulled the ball back down and threw it up the seam into man coverage, and it got intercepted. But there was a couple of throws in that Clemson game where there was just straight drops. Some of the throws were bad, but there was 3 or 4 in the very early going that he couldn't get momentum going because he was dealing with drops. And the same thing was happening in the Florida State game earlier this year where he was dealing with drops. And one of the interceptions, the receiver batted the ball up in the air with one hand, and it got picked off 5 yards behind him by a safety. I mean, that's just bad luck of the draw, but it got very overlooked, and everybody looked at the box score and said, well, he threw 2 picks against Clemson, so he's not any good. I mean, I don't understand why people do it. So I'm excited that he's there. If you want to read more about him, go to cover1.net. Probably one of the freshest articles on the website right now. I don't know exactly all the content that's been brewing out of our website today, but check it out. You also need to check out Thrive Fantasy. If you're doing the same old boring way of doing daily fantasy sports, or you're tired of using the fake $50,000 budget, you need to try something else. Well, you need to try Thrive Fantasy. It's very simple. Go to thrivefantasy.com, check it out. You can do these sport prop bets and put together a lineup that way. You can do it for the NFL, for the NBA, for Major League Baseball, and they could be adding the NHL at any time. So if you are a diehard fantasy sports guy like myself or girl, then what you need to do is check out Thrive Fantasy. The best thing is bit.ly/Russ NFL Draft. Go to that website, sign up, deposit $10. They will match you the $10, and you'll be all set and on your way, and you'll be able to do all these sport prop bets. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy, very simple, and easy to use. So check it out today with Thrive Fantasy. So moving forward, though, from Ryan Finley, moving on to the other accepted invites. I believe we're up to 29 for right now. I don't know if anything else has been added for today, but the Senior Bowl, January 26th of 2019. We've got about 29 guys up on the roster. Gerald Willis has officially accepted his. The one I'm very excited about is Drew, outside of Ryan Finley, of course, is Drew Tranquil, the linebacker for Notre Dame, a former safety, bulked up a little bit. It's probably going to play more of a box role and maybe a more of a nickel role, but he's a fine fit for today's NFL. That's a pass-heavy, spread concepts. He's going to have a role. And then also Jermaine Pratt from North Carolina State, a linebacker I was very high on. I'm excited that he will be there as well. There's actually a couple of NC State guys on here, but through the invites, is there anybody else that has really stood out for you? I know there's an Auburn guy on there.
There is an Auburn guy, but if you're going to go with Ryan Finley being your favorite, I got to go with my season-long favorite, with Jalen Ferguson, the defensive end out of Louisiana Tech, because I believe he accepted it just a few days ago when you tweeted at me and told me. Yeah, definitely a guy that he has dominated just when Louisiana Tech has traveled to FBS schools. You know, he had a great game versus Mississippi State and LSU. He has the acceleration. He has the flexibility, the pass rush moves to be a 4-3 defensive end. And I just think seeing him in the one-on-one battles, playing against that top-notch competition on each rep, I think he could dominate the Senior Bowl. And you heard a lot about Marcus Davenport coming into the Senior Bowl week last year. And, of course, kind of surprising in the sense that he was worth a couple traded the New Orleans Saints traded a couple draft picks to go up and get him. A lot of people thought it was Lamar Jackson. At least I did. I remember watching that on TV and just standing up and literally falling on the floor because I had no idea that was going to be the case. But Davenport, he's been okay. I mean, if that's what New Orleans believes in, that's how close they were. I'm not going to knock it because they're in a pretty good situation right now. But based on the hype going back to Davenport, I think Jalen Ferguson could kind of follow that same route. But I think Ferguson is a lot more technically sound than Davenport. Davenport's the better athlete, but I think Ferguson kind of takes on that same mold going into Mobile. And then you talked about Dontavius Russell, the defensive tackle out of Auburn. I don't know if he started every game since a sophomore, but he's played almost every single snap, it seems like, for Auburn. He's just a dominant interior presence. Maybe not the interior pass rusher you're seeing a lot these days. Of course, he's not going to be dominating in that regard, but I still think he shows two-gapping ability. He shows some versatility as a nose guard and a three-tech. He can pretty much play anywhere across the line. He's a guy that's really good with his hands, and he has great vision in the run game. You see that constantly, taking on blocks, shoving them out of the way, but his vision, he always keeps it on the ball and development of the play. Kind of plays like a linebacker mentality, but as a 6'3", 320-pound defensive lineman. So he's definitely an athletic guy up front, which I'm interested to see because Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown get a lot of praise for Auburn, but Dontavius Russell is pretty much the glue on that defensive line.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Dontavius Russell. I love the way he does the push-pull technique. I like the way he stacks and sheds guys. He's very talented, 6'3", 320. He's going to be a lot of fun, and I think he could very much dominate when he gets in here because I'm not saying he's going to dominate because there is some interesting offensive linemen. Garrett Bradbury, offensive center for North Carolina State. He's 6'3", 300. I'm assuming we'll see those two get into it on one-on-ones. Nate Davis, offensive tackle for Charlotte, 6'3", 311. I would assume he's going to show some versatility, play some guard spots, and move around the offensive line like Isaiah Wynn did last year for Georgia, especially when he was down in Mobile. But I don't know if Davis is going to be as versatile or as effective, I guess, or have that lateral ability like Isaiah Wynn. But then another name, Chris Lindstrom, offensive guard for Boston College, 6'4", 310. He's just a man-eater. I mean, he's a big, thick dude that even though he's 310, I mean, he looks like he's about 325, 330. So he's a big guy.
That Boston College offensive line is legit. I mean, they are so good up front. I mean, so technically sound too.
Yeah, and they still are, and just in the trenches overall they're good. And you flip it over to the defensive side, they had Harold Landry last year. This year they've got Zach Allen, who is a monster at 6'5", 285. I mean, he is every bit of that 6'5", 285. So I don't know what the water is in Boston College, but I need some of that shipped to my house because those guys are just massive. But Zach Allen is another name as well that I'm excited to watch. Last night I was watching Chase Hansen, outside linebacker for Utah. I think a poor man's Drew Tranquill would probably be the best way to put him. I think that's what Utah's trying to do with him. They're trying to make him one of those linebackers that plays in the slot, can blitz and stop the run, but he's one of those guys that I think is just overly aggressive, puts himself in really bad positions, gets too far upfield, too deep, and I'm a little questionable of exactly what he can do. I don't want to sit here and say he's draftable or not. We haven't gotten that far in the process, but I was watching him, so I'm intrigued by him. But is there anybody else, or we cover it all?
Just a name I'm intrigued by is Andy Isabella, the wide receiver out of UMass. And I think he's just – every week in the NFL, we see some new wide receiver step up. You know, you're seeing what the Packers with Valdez-Scantling coming up with some big plays for Aaron Rodgers. And you're just seeing, you know, and I don't want to pose this as like the new cliche, but it's almost like who's the next Adam Thielen? Who's that next 6th or 7th round draft pick that you know is talented, but maybe based on style of play, being pigeonholed in one certain area, or just who you play, you know, the level of competition. I think Isabella's a guy that can rise to the occasion at the Senior Bowl. That's what these events are for, especially with those lower-tier school guys. Rise to the occasion, play against top-tier talent, and see how you progress throughout the week. So he's a guy I'm keeping my eye on. I just like those style of players, you know, like Jaleel Scott last year, New Mexico State. Didn't have the greatest Senior Bowl week. You know, didn't go as high in the draft as I thought he would. But still, I just like to see how those guys kind of evolve throughout the year and then in the offseason when draft preparation comes. So Andy Isabella is a wide receiver and a player I'm focusing on in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. I mean, you bring up Jaleel Scott. You bring up well, you didn't bring him up, but, you know, Marcel Aitman, a couple of guys that were just, you know, freak athletes with great length and everything else, coming in and playing receiver. Well, we only have one receiver right now accepted, and that's Andy Isabella. So it'll be interesting to who McSorley and Finley throw the ball to. But right now it's Isabella all the way, who actually, like you said, he leads the nation in receptions and everything else. So he's been very productive for UMass. I'm excited to watch him for sure. But I'm also excited for the East-West Shrine game. This is an all-star game that we haven't talked about yet, and there's quite the names here. I'm not going to go through every single one, but there's, you know, some big-name guys from big-time schools. I wouldn't say big-name guys, but one of the guys that really stands out right away, C.J. Conrad, tight end out of Kentucky. I'm excited to see what he can do. What else is there? I'm just scrolling down the list. Chris Nelson, defensive tackle for Texas. One of those guys that's 6'1", 315, similar to a Poona Ford size frame guy, but not as productive or efficient as him. But he'll be interesting at what he can do there. Michigan State brings in the guy that can't catch, Matt Sokol, the tight end. He's awful. Don't need to worry about him. Cody Thompson, wide receiver for Toledo, and Jordan Ellis, running back for University of Virginia. I'm intrigued with these two guys. Cody Thompson has a quiet year this year. He gained some buzz last year, came back. The buzz has kind of fallen off. Jordan Ellis is one of those north-south guys with good size at 225 who's just going to run right through you. Kind of like a Gus Edwards, I guess I would say. He's always running forward, and Gus Edwards is coming on for the Baltimore Ravens now. But I think really this is just a good group of offensive linemen. And there's a lot of size here within the offensive line. Louisiana Tech, O'Shea Dugas, offensive guard. He's 6'5", 330. Vanderbilt's got their offensive tackle there, Justin Skule, 6'6", 315. Another name, Ty Johnson, running back for Maryland. He's intriguing. I think he's a productive player. It's going to be fun to watch him down there. But is there anybody that really stands out to you? There's quite a few SEC guys, especially on the offensive line and really at the tight end position for this.
Yeah, you took one of mine, C.J. Conrad, just a very smooth, technically sound tight end. And Kentucky, they've hung around the top 25 for quite some time now, but there's reasons why, because Mark Stoops has developed that program. And there is definitely some NFL talent on that team. And another guy that's in this game that still has some inconsistencies, but Derek Beatty, a 6'3" cornerback, about 190 or so pounds. Not the most aware corner, but has the length. He has, the physicality that you want, and he will come up and hit you in the run game. Will come up and play the edge really well, set the edge in the run game. But he's a guy that I think speed and awareness are two of his biggest concerns, which unfortunately those are two of the, I would say, the bigger needs in a cornerback. But when teams are looking at you, especially to draft you really high, speed and awareness is going to be two of the top traits that they're going to be looking at. But I think this is a late round guy that you could see develop into at least a contributor somewhere down the road, because I think his leap at 6'3" stands out. And then Sean Rawlings, the senior center from Ole Miss, a guy that is just very consistent. I believe he's a team captain of the team. He's not going to sit there and wow you with any one particular trait, but you can kind of tell he has that high football intelligence and is just technically sound. He anchors well. He has the flexibility, the loose, hips and everything to, kind of stay on par when he has to change directions and can play well at the second level. Biggest thing with him is injury history. I know he sat out a fair amount of games before this season. Now he's dealing with something else right now. So injury concerns will be the biggest thing with Sean Rawlings, but overall a pretty technically sound center.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of guys on this list. There's a lot more accepted invites from guys for the Shrin game for sure. Some other guys as well, and I'm intrigued by this one. Austin Hoyt, offensive guard, well, technically offensive tackle for BYU. He's 6'8", 315. He's got an interesting story. Of course, he did one of those missions with BYU, and he did it in Colorado and stuff. So he's a little bit older. I believe he graduated high school in 2011. So what would that make him? He was 18 in 2011. What year is it? 2018. So he's 25, but he's got about 30 starts. Again, big guy, 6'8", 315. A team's going to like that. They're going to see that length. And he does a pretty good job anchoring. I think his kick slide's okay. He can get to the second level. He stood out a little bit when I was watching their running back. What's his name? Canada. I think his last name is Canada. I don't know BYU a ton, but I mean, this is a guy that played with Jamal Williams. So he's got some experience with some decent running backs, and BYU and their ability to run the football. They do a pretty good job with it. So he's a big part to it. So I'm intrigued to see what he does. He might gain some buzz from the Shrin game. Daniel Helm, tight end for Duke, 6'4", 255. He's a piece to their passing game. I'm not saying he's a game changer. He'll probably be a day 3 pick or a UDFA, but he's got, H-back potential. They utilize him in a lot of different ways. Not the most efficient inline blocker, but he can do it manageable. So he's a piece to watch for when you're watching Daniel Jones, and you'll see Daniel Helm out there. Another name, and I'm not a big small school guy, but Jordan Brown, defensive back for South Dakota State, 6'1", 200. He has been actually very productive in the Missouri Valley, the Missouri Valley Football Conference. He was very productive last year. He had 72 tackles with 3 interceptions. He's got 8 interceptions over the last 3 years. He's got 3 interceptions this year. Not as many tackles, but he is an aggressive player. He's got good length, and he's actually pretty built for 6'1" and 200 pounds of what he's listed at. So I'm a fan of his game, and I think he's pretty good. And then the last two, and I'll leave it at this, but Armin Watts, defensive tackle for Arkansas, 6'5", 300. He stood out a little bit. I think he's got some length to be put all over the line of scrimmage. He's got some versatility. Arkansas likes to play him in a variety of ways. I think he's probably best suited as a 3 technique, but it wouldn't surprise me if he, plays as a 5, plays as a 1, and a team that obviously stands out is my Detroit Lions, just simply because of their need at defensive line, but their ability to play a guy like Deshaun Hand all over. They've got Damon Harrison. They've they pretty much plug him up on the nose and into the A gaps. But Armin Watts is a guy that can do the rest in the B and the C gaps. So I'm intrigued by him. And then lastly, Trey Watson, linebacker for Maryland. Guy's always around the football, tons of tackles, tons of production. I believe he's got 5 interceptions on this season alone for a Maryland team that's been, all over the place with DJ Durkin. Trey Watson was a very bright spot for them defensively this year. So at 6'2", 236, I think this could be a game where he really puts himself maybe even more so on the map. And I talked about some linebackers already from the Senior Bowl with Chase Hansen and some of the other guys. I think Trey Watson's a guy that, the week before the Senior Bowl could gain some buzz. And I'm hoping so. So Shrine game is looking good, looking bright. Do you have anything else to add between the Senior Bowl or the East-West Shrine game?
No, not much. You covered most of it. Just for fun, though, with the Shrine game, Cody Thompson, the wide receiver from Toledo,
yep,
he was the guy that had the video go viral of him blocking the punt, and then it ends up in his hand.
Oh, yeah.
Up in the end zone. I remember watching that. It's like, how on earth did the ball get in his hand? So that's him. So you'll actually get to see the player and not just the highlight in the Shrine game.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, he's pretty solid. I'm a fan. But what I'm not a fan of, and I'm going to go on a rant here, and I think we'll close it out after that. I'll probably ask you a couple of questions to end the show. But what I'm not a fan of is Michigan fans, first and foremost, but also people trying to say, cool it on Jim Harbaugh. As we know, this past weekend, we saw Ohio State versus Michigan. And I'm not saying that Jim Harbaugh needs to lose his job, but I think Jim Harbaugh should be facing some scrutiny. I think Jim Harbaugh should be getting criticized a lot more than what people want to say he should be facing. I think 38-13, the overall record that's been presented to me, he's 38-13 and this and that. That's cool, man. But 4 of those 13 losses are against your biggest rival on your schedule. The biggest rivalry in sports, apparently, is Michigan and Ohio State. Well, in the last 15 years, you have 1 win. And in the last 4 years, you've paid a guy $9 million to lose to Ohio State. And this one, with your graduating class, your first one, the guys that are on there, Chase Winovich, Rashawn Gary, a lot of these guys, or not Rashawn Gary, but Chase Winovich is one of those guys. Karan Higdon, one of those guys. These are guys that were there from the very beginning, the day that Jim Harbaugh stepped foot in Ann Arbor. These guys changed their letter of intent or whatever the case may be. They were extremely interested in Michigan. And they signed, and they went there, and they committed. In the last 4 years, they've been grinding, and I'm not saying the players are bad. I think Karan Higdon, I've said it on this podcast before, I think is one of the most pound-for-pound best running backs in the nation. And I'm not saying he's got the most elite ability, but for a guy that's 5'10", 205 pounds, he looks like he's about 220 pounds, and he will run you over and take your head off if you try to tackle him. He's one of the best pound-for-pound backs. Chase Winovich is the best player on that freaking team. Not Rashawn Gary, not Devin Bush, who apparently won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, who is not even the best player on his defense. He's not even he might be the 3rd best player on the defense. And I don't even know if that's true because you got David Long, you got Rashawn Gary, you got Chase Winovich, you got a ton of guys. But regardless, you have all these guys, and that proves my point. With all these guys, you still lost. And this time, you didn't just lose. You got embarrassed. Embarrassed. You allowed 62 points. Your defense allowed 55 points. Your special teams gave up 7 points on a blocked punt. But people are going to sit there and say, oh, well, it's about rebuilding the culture. It's about, the last 4 head coaches that have been there, Brady Hoke and Gary Moeller and Bo Schembechler and Lloyd Carr. I don't care what their win percentages are. I don't care what any of those coaches have done. It's not like Jim Harbaugh took this over after Joe Paterno. Jim Harbaugh has, won 10 games in a season 3 times. 3 times in his career at Michigan, but he's not won a single conference championship. And think about this for a minute. Mark D'Antonio took over Michigan State, a very bad Michigan State program, a program that players from Michigan didn't want to go to. Players from Ohio didn't want to go to. But this was a program where he found Le'Veon Bell, Connor Cook, Kirk Cousins, Felton Davis, Shalik Calhoun, so many players and so many names, Monte Nicholson, Darquez Dennard, Trey Waynes, and they turned and developed these guys into something. And guess what he did over time? He won 3 Big Ten championships. And in his 4th year, the same year that Jim Harbaugh's in right now, well, granted, in that 4th year for Mark D in 2010, it wasn't, 2011, there wasn't a conference championship game. So there was basically like the co-champion thing. Well, if that was the case, Michigan State was a co-champion of the Big Ten, but it still counted as a conference title. Granted, things have changed now, but that's not an excuse. If things change, you either evolve or you die. And if you don't want to evolve, and because of the position that he's in, he can't die. Not like physically or anything like that, but I mean like his contract and everything else, he's never going away. He's going to retire as a Michigan coach. He's never going anywhere. He's the boss. He's the man in charge since he stepped foot. And if people don't believe me, I live 15 minutes away from Ann Arbor. I'm very close to the University of Michigan. I know everything, not everything that goes on, but I hear a lot, I read a lot, and quite frankly, I know more than probably the average person or somebody on Twitter telling me to, relax, it's about winning the culture. But winning the culture. Brady Hoke won 11 games in his first year there with Rich Rodriguez's guys. It's not like he was taking over for Rich Rod. Sure, he took over for Brady Hoke, but he took over a winning franchise. He took over a winning tradition. And the crazy thing about it is he can't beat his rival. 62 points. It's ridiculous. And this guy's getting paid $9 million, and then we can't put him or grade him upon that off of 0 conference championships? That's what coaches come there to do, especially Michigan. It's not like it's the University of Cincinnati where you can win 8-9 games and be okay. And if you don't win the MAC or whatever conference they're in, it's okay. No, I mean, his job is to come in, win the Big Ten, and compete for a national championship, and he can't do it. He's never done it. And if I'm a Michigan fan, I don't believe he's ever going to do it because it's the most talented team he's ever had. A few years ago, he had the most draftable Michigan team ever with 13 draft picks on it, and he still didn't get it done. So I just find it insane, and it's asinine when people say, we'll get a grip and this and that. No, you get a grip. Set the expectations higher for a guy that's making just as much money, if not more money, than Urban Meyer, Nick Saban. And now you've got guys like Mac Brown and Les Miles coming back. And I know those guys aren't going to compete specifically with Jim Harbaugh in the Big Ten. But those guys are going to make a little bit less and probably do the same, if not more, as as Jim Harbaugh. And they've been out of touch and out of the game for a couple of years now. So I just find it's mind-boggling to me. And the guy allows 62 points, and he doesn't want to talk to the media. And then the people in the media are going to give him a pass. Don't give him a pass. If this was Mark D'Antonio, he'd be fired or he'd be ridiculed. If this was James Franklin, mind you, James Franklin, who took over a terrible Penn State program after Bill O'Brien and Joe Paterno and all the stuff that was going on at Penn State, he won a Big Ten championship in 3 years. Paul Chryst, Wisconsin, second year on the job, won a Big Ten championship, or at least got to Indy and competed for one. We all know what Urban Meyer can do at Ohio State. He is a better coach than Jim Harbaugh. We can admit to that. It's not his fault that he makes less money than Jim Harbaugh, but that's the problem. He makes less money than Jim Harbaugh, but yet he's beaten him 4 times, and this time he beat him 62 to 39. It's just, I know you're an SEC guy, but this is more than just like SEC versus Big Ten. No, this is like Jim Harbaugh is on top of the world for doing absolutely nothing, and it's mind-boggling to me.
No, I agree 100%. I've been, I don't say one of his hardest critics, but everything you said, knowing the situation he's coming into, and, you know, whether Michigan is quote-unquote down or not, there's still a solid foundation for football. It's not like, you know, you have to clean house for 5 years and then get back on track. Well, he showed that he can win and compete early, and now he's not answering to it. Like, this should be the year that Michigan should be really the number one team in college football, if not to Nick Saban, to be second in all college football, and he's not making the cut. Like you said, he's bringing in his players. And sure, we can sit here and look at 8-1 in the conference, 10-2 overall, but still, when that's been almost the status quo for 3 seasons now, then you go get blown out by Ohio State, who, for their standards, are not good this year. And I know, they're scoring a lot of points, but their defense is awful. And then Michigan having the best defense in all of football, in all of the Big Ten scoring and total. And you're telling me you're going to give up 62 points? Like, that's not cutting it. I don't care if it's just a bad day. It doesn't matter. If you're going to put yourself in that situation where you pay that coach that much money and you sit there and you're going to praise him and praise him and praise him, there's no way you can give him a pass. I haven't heard – I actually hear a lot of critiques from him, but maybe it's just the parts of the country we live in that are differently. But I know there's national radio. One radio host coming out and said, I would take Jim Harbaugh over Nick Saban. I said, why? That makes no sense. There's nothing on paper. There's nothing physical, tangible, any way you want to look at it that you could say Jim Harbaugh is a better coach than Nick Saban, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, Jim Harbaugh's not getting it done. I mean, of course, you're not going to fire the guy or everything, but he needs to be criticized for not making the cut because, what's next? Another, Orange Bowl or another Capital One, but whatever's the bowl games out there, like, that's not going to cut it because there's a possibility that they go 10-3 and not make it to the Big Ten championship and not beating your rival again. That's not going to cut it. That would not please me if I was a fan or a supporter of that or that program.
Yeah, and furthermore, and I'm not saying this as like an angry. I'm not a Michigan fan. I'm just saying because I live in the state, I hear about Michigan all the time. I go to work, my 9 to 5, and I listen to guys talking about Michigan football, and I get the short end of the stick because I'm a Spartan fan. But yet during his tenure, yeah, we're 2-2 against him. But I mean, we have 2 wins over our biggest rival. He has 0 wins over his biggest rival. And again, 1 win in 15 years. 15 years. You know what I was doing 15 years ago? I wasn't even a freshman in high school. I mean, come on, right? Like, get this together. If you can't, then get out. But he's not going to ever get out because he's the man in charge. He can do and say whatever he wants there, which is fine. I don't blame him. He's got a good gig. He's making great money. He's going to retire wealthy. It's going to be all good for him. But it's just, you did all this stuff like recruiting. You slept over at a kid's house to get a kid to come over and sign a dotted line. And you do all these asinine things. And you're one of the guys that, wants to expand it to 8 teams. Well, no wonder why you want to expand it to 8 teams, because you can't be one of the best 4 teams in the country because you don't have as a coach. And furthermore, he was part of the reasons to why they lost 19 or 20 games in a row on the road against ranked teams. And the only reason why that changed this year was because for some reason, college football and the ranking system decided to rank Michigan State a few days before Michigan and Michigan State played each other. They made them 22nd in the country, but we all knew that Michigan State wasn't going to win that game. And even so, that game was 21-7 against Michigan State, who has one of the worst offenses in college football. And if you don't believe me, check them. They're ranked like 115th in the country. It's terrible for a Big Ten team like that to be ranked 115th in total offense. That's atrocious. But then you look at Michigan, and they're ranked good, nationally offensively. They've got one of the best defenses, and then this happened. It's so mind blowing to me. And then people say, well, he's 38-13. 38-13 don't matter. 38 wins, and you got no conference championship. Cool, great. No appearance in it either. So I find it comical. I find it amusing. I find it stupid. But I had to get that off my chest, and having the privilege of a podcast, I could do it on the show. So even though we are an NFL draft show, but if you are paying attention to Michigan and you are paying attention to their draft prospects, Chase Winovich is the best player on that team. Rashawn Gary's okay. A little bit overrated, but he's okay. Devin Bush is okay. I heard something in the broadcast that he's a top 10 pick. That's incorrect. Lavert Hill, he's good. Probably more of a nickel corner or a nickel back. Sorry, nickel corner is not the right term, but he'll be covering a lot of slot guys, but he flips his hips well. He could be a number 2 corner, I guess, at the next level. I would take him in Detroit in a heartbeat over Tease Tabor for sure. David Long, though, very good, been very effective in man coverage. And then they've got some players on their offensive line that are okay, but Karan Higdon is probably the name to know offensively. And other than that, Michigan, I mean, that's it. That sums them up. Shea Patterson, overhyped, overrated. I said that going into the year. I still stand by it. He's just not good. I mean, he's not good. He wasn't good at Ole Miss. He's not good here. He's what, 5'10", soaking wet, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, he struggled mightily at Ole Miss. I mean, he struggled he just struggled with consistency. Sure, you could see the flashes, but flashes are fine your freshman season. When you're being evaluated as an NFL quarterback, flashes are just, a flash in the pan. That's all they are. You have to string out consistency. But quickly going back to Jim Harbaugh, and then we'll shut up about it. But he's not getting it done on the road. In his first year, in 2015, he was 4-1 away from Michigan Stadium, and then he's 2-2, 3-2, and then this year he's also again 3-2. So he's doing fine at home. He can't win those road games, and obviously with losing all the games to Ohio State, that just puts even more pressure. So it's almost false hope when Michigan's on a run early in the season. Then the fans are just like, well, when the November schedule comes out, can they prevail? And right now they're not. So. But yeah, I agree with you on all the draft pick or all the draft prospects on Michigan. I think Chase Winovich is one of those guys that I don't care if he's not going to do everything that you want Myles Garrett to do or this, that, and the other, but he's going to give you 100% effort, and he's going to just win with effort. And I know there's some guys in the NFL that strictly do that right now. I mean, I think a guy like T.J. Watt, I wasn't a big fan of him coming out of Wisconsin because I thought he was just a stand-up rusher that just had the quickness and athleticism to get the quarterback. But somebody wants to do that with Chase Winovich, the next level, they can find success that way. And I think that could be some kind of, skill that they could, or some kind of a skill set they can look at to mold him. But I think Winovich is a lot better as just a down 4-3 defensive end that could really, if he polishes up a little bit more, I think he can surprise a lot of people just based on where he gets picked.
Yeah, I mean, touching base on Chase, I mean, I wrote a piece 2 weeks ago about him. How I think he's got first-round potential simply off of effort and just there's teams in the back end of the first round that draft good football players. That's what he is. He's a good football player. If he goes to day 2 in the draft, that's fine. But he reminds me a lot of Clay Matthews, not the blonde hair thing, but just like physical ability, the burst, the motor. That's exactly what Clay was when he came out of USC. Exact same size, 6'3", 255. So I think he's more of I think you could stand him up. I know I saw some mock drafts where Rashawn Gary was I believe a second-round pick for the Detroit Lions in a couple of mock drafts. If that's the case, give me a hard pass. If Chase Winovich's on the board, give me Chase Winovich for the Detroit Lions. I think the way that they've been using stand-up edge rushers and using Ziggy, who's good as gone for us, I would love Chase in Detroit and the things that he can do. But he would be a good fit for Green Bay. He would be a good fit for Kansas City. There's a couple of teams out there that would be fortunate for him. But last thing on Jim Harbaugh, I swear, but on some of those road games that you saw, quite a few of them were Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana, Purdue, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, a couple years ago, they lose on the road at Iowa. Last year, they're losing. I mean, we'll give them a pass at Penn State, at Wisconsin. Then the year in his very first year, his one road loss was in the opener at Utah. So, I mean, still not getting it done against just mediocre programs. And I know, sometimes those teams come up and grab you by the ankles, but still, I mean, again, you have that expectation. When your name's Jim Harbaugh, I don't care what team you're playing. You got to beat those teams. You got to beat them good. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to say, but a win isn't just a win too when you're at Michigan. You got to sit there and show him who's boss, and he's not getting it done, and we can just leave it at that. Yeah.
Well, like I said, guys, tons of great content coming out every day over at Cover One. You got to check it out. The best way to check it out is becoming a premium member. I know that sounds a little much, but it's really not. It's not. I mean, you could literally sign up for $1 a month. You could do $5 a month. You could do a one-time fee every single year, just one-time fee starting today, and then you wouldn't have to pay again until next year on November 27th of 2019 for just $10, a one-time fee. And that gets you the third tier, or you could do the fourth tier, which is the best one. It gets you the access to the Slack channel where you can talk with me and Christian directly. You can literally direct message us on Slack and that goes directly to our phone like a text message, essentially. So it's basically like texting us, but that's for $25. That's a one-time fee. I mean, I know it's the holidays. I know it's a bad time to ask, but one time, $10, $25, use my name, use Christian's name, whatever it may be, and you will get those prices. So do it today. Check it out at cover1.net. Hit the premium content tab and sign up and subscribe. It's going to be a lot of fun. All draft season, all football season. And of course, you can check out all the free content that's out there. I recently just put out something on Max Sharping, the offensive tackle for Northern Illinois, who has been invited to the Senior Bowl, hasn't accepted it yet, but he has been invited. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. He needs some work. I mean, he's got tools. I kind of sound corny, I guess, when I say this, but Max Sharping has all the tools to be successful, but needs some resharpening. Yes, every pun intended on that one. But no, I think the kick slide's a little sloppy. I think it's more of a gallop than a slide. I think he opens up his hips way too fast, doesn't get enough into the depth of the kick slide to really open his hips, because it's natural. When you're an offensive tackle and you're going into your kick slide, once you get to a certain depth and the defensive end is going to run the arc on you, to prevent that, you've got to open your hips and you got to stay square with them or you're going to get beat. But you don't want to do it too much and you don't want to do it too soon, because then you're either going to literally fall onto your left side or right side, depending on how you're kick sliding. But also, I mean, you could, put yourself in a position where you're easier to counter back inside. And I think that was something he was struggling with. There was a couple of times that Brian Burns could have burned him with it, but he didn't. He, for whatever reason, stopped countering inside and rushing inside. He just went back outside for some reason. So I don't know if that's Brian Burns just not, fully understanding how to counter and stuff. But Max Sharping, he's a fun prospect to watch. I think he's a right tackle at the next level. But he's definitely a name to watch. I know you talked about him a little bit last week. I think hand placement, though, is pretty good. I think he does a good job attacking the second level. He takes good angles, and he does a good job walling off defenders. So that's important, too. I mean, again, it's not like he's undraftable. I think he's quite athletic. I think, though, again, with the kick slide and some of those things, similar to Colton Miller in a sense to last year, probably. He's probably not as bad, but similar. Not as athletic, but not as bad. So check that out over at Cover One. But speaking of content, I know you've been studying guys. I know you've been watching the tape and grinding the film. Is there anybody that's been standing out or anything you're working on over the next couple of days?
Yeah, but before NIU and Buffalo play in the MAC championship game on Friday. So, of course, you get some championship action Friday before. So you can check out Max Sharping, Sutton Smith, another guy that you like, the edge rusher out of Northern Illinois. Be interesting to see how his draft prospects go. And then Buffalo has Tyree Jackson, the junior, 6'7", 6'8", Buffalo quarterback, and then Anthony Johnson, who's his favorite target, and Khalil Hodge, the inside linebacker that could gain a lot of buzz depending on how his draft season goes. But, yeah, speaking of Senior Bowl, Gerald Willis III, Miami defensive tackle, had a huge opening game versus LSU. I mean, constantly won with burst and just his quickness off the snap. He has this club over move that he loves to use, and he exercises it perfectly. I mean, it's almost always successful. Sometimes, or I guess his biggest issue is that sometimes he'll rise his pad level, which obviously, if anybody knows, if you don't have the appropriate pad level, you are almost virtually taken out of the play for any lineman, defense or offensive lineman. But you saw that mostly against a team like Boston College. We were talking about Chris Lindstrom and that whole Boston College unit being just physical, nasty, maulers up front. Well, Gerald Willis struggled a little bit against that type of – he didn't get his quickness off. Those guys were punching him in the mouth a lot more frequently. So if he can find some consistency in pad level and maybe just more versatility, not necessarily based on where he aligns, but more, I guess diversity would be the right word there, but more diversity in what he, plans to do and collapsing the pocket as a pass rusher or run defender. But he has very good vision. He has the quickness. He has the acceleration and the athleticism. So Gerald Willis, and a guy that gets lost in a very solid group of defensive linemen. I know we talk about that almost every week at length, but Gerald Willis is a guy that I think with a big week in Mobile could sniff somewhere in the top 50, if not, even higher than that when the week's over with.
Yeah, no, I like Gerald Willis a lot. He caught my eye when they played LSU, and yeah, I know he's got a good get off, good burst, good explosiveness, good hand usage in the way he works his hands, and I think he actually has a pretty decent pass rush plan and stuff. So, no, I like him a lot. Anything else, or are we good here?
I think that's it, and just kind of of note. I mean, we've been on for about an hour now, but kind of note, we're just going to kind of focus to our content a lot towards Senior Bowl and some other college football all-star game prospects. So definitely you will be prepared when that time of the year comes.
Yes, no doubt about it. Christian, where can we follow you on Twitter, my man?
@_Christian Page, Page.
Guys, smash that follow button. Christian is a must follow. Also, follow me at Russ NFL Draft. All of our content is on there, and everything is always a good time on the Twitter world. So, Christian, appreciate you joining me. Hopefully you feel better. But as for all of you guys, enjoy the slate of games that are coming on this weekend for Conference Championship weekend. If we don't talk to you later this week, we will talk to you same time, same place next week. Until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.